Do I always have to?
We are live.
We are live, and looks like I will end this live stream with my shirt off. Why does this always happen to me? Welcome everyone for tuning in. Give me 1 second here while I actually pull up the live stream myself. Bam, there we go. And sweet, there she is. Super random thumbnail. All right, here we go. Oh, and let me turn down my computer sound so that you guys don't get to hear me a minute after I say something. All right, we already got Matt and Dev tuning in. We got 11 watchers right now. Peter's just printing out our outline and then grabbing some tea and coffee for us. Just realized we set that camera up way back there today. It's all right. Hopefully this is looking good enough picture quality. How is our sound quality, everyone? Please throw a comment up there and let me know that we are sounding all right. I think we actually set up I should be going out of the, is it the right channel, Peter?
Yes.
This is what Peter would sound like over here, so if you're only getting sound out of one speaker. Eclipse Brewing, good morning. Good morning. Wow. Hey, look at that. All right, looks like we got good sound. We got good picture. Peter is making me tea right now.
I don't have a coffee cup.
I was like, what are you doing?
Hurry up. You can start the intro. I got this.
All right. Well, I'm going to get going. It looks like we got 40 people tuned in already. Hey, somebody says it sounds even better than usual, so.
Hey, look at us. Just doing everything, right.
And this weird person, Samantha Cook, is tuned in. People want you to pour him some pints too, so. All right. So anyway, yeah, welcome to the Genus Brewing live stream, a live stream that we try to do every Sunday morning at 8:45 Pacific Standard Time. Typically, this goes for more or less an hour length of time. And how we start out, if you haven't tuned in before, is that we start out with some Genus news, some updates from around Genus, kind of what we're doing on here, new projects, fun beers on tap. And, oh, sweet, somebody, I think somebody just gave us money. I'm not really sure how that works. Thank you, Tito, though. Yeah, I think so. I don't know.
Super chats are cool. Thank you so much.
Super chats, thank you, Tito. And yeah, so we do some Genus news, and then we start going to a little bit of beer news. After that, we segue into our beer of the week, which we choose a more or less random style and break down of that style for you guys. And then we go into usually 2 or 3 discussion topics. Oh, Peter's double bagging again. No, don't put that nasty tea in here.
Too late.
And he just put...
Black tea. It's regular black tea.
This is the licorice stuff, isn't it?
No.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. I guess it's regular black tea.
Jesus Christmas.
Okay. And then we open up to discussion topics at the end. And those discussion topics will be overlaid on my hair actually being sheared off by Peter today. So we brought in some clippers. So I will lose the chia pet that is attached to my head, and Peter will hopefully lose the I think people refer to them as pubic hairs attached to your face.
Nobody's referred to them like that.
Several people have referred to them like that.
By several people, he means my wife. And although she is the most important
My
person,
wife too.
She got it from my wife, though. My wife's the trendsetter that started that whole thing.
Oh, it's a donation, not a super chat. So, but anyway, thank you, Tito. That was awfully nice.
Sweet.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Best part of waking up is whatever that is called.
Oh God, now my hair looks super crazy too. I was just like, pump it up to 11. I did actually.
Power level
I did
9,000.
take my weekly shower for you today, though. So
You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I don't know. You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. All right, so let's go on to some Genus news.
So first off, we tapped an amazing hazy this week. It's been on tap for a few days now. We are literally calling it the Jay-Z because it's a juicy hazy, and
why not make up new words and styles? That's what we do all the time anyway.
That's sort of us. So we got that on tap. That has been a ridiculously fast turnover. I think as of like today, that beer is more or less 2 weeks old. So super, super fresh IPA, and I think all the flavors are coming through as a result. Otherwise, we also got a kind of imperial red brewed in the fermenter, kind of an American red, I think is what Tim was going for there.
Yeah, a nice American red, except for not going to be super on the hoppy side like our last one was, so it's not going to be bordering that red IPA. It's going to be nice and just a touch sweet and fruity from the hops, but not aggro bitter like our last one was.
Yep. So that guy is chugging along, and also we got some pretty heavy-duty looking keg racks in.
Yeah, I'm excited for those.
So yeah, we should be doing those right now, but we take people's entertainment for higher value than that. But otherwise we'll be installing those in our walk-in. Hopefully, actually adding a few more taps while we're at it, since we're gonna have to pull out all of our kegs.
Capacity to go up to at least 20. We have 11 taps on right now, so doing 20 taps will be really nice. We'll be able to put our sodas on tap without having to walk back into the walk-in.
Yes,
and,
yes, please.
Just be able to have more beer.
That will be amazing, actually, to do that, because that is a pain in the butt to have to go pull a soda or fill a growler with a picnic tap.
Just if it has to overflow from the foam, we just gotta let it spill all over the back.
All right, I gotta tame this beast down a little bit. It just looks ridiculous. All right, and then let's see. The quote-unquote storm of the century went over us last night. It literally just rained at my house. I don't know what it did out here.
We got some pretty loud thunder cracks.
Yeah.
There
was
some solid thunder and lightning. There were some times that the thunder itself shook our house. But anyway, it is very wet today. Hopefully nothing major happened in the city. It wasn't as bad as I think we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know.
They're saying like chance of tornadoes and stuff like that. Nothing that crazy happened.
Baseball-size hail. Yeah, it's like, it just rained. That's all it did. It rained. It blew a little bit. It's like, it was just kind of a rainy night.
We got some Thundercats.
There's a few thunderstorms, yeah.
And WIB 5 got kegged up, and so Will It Beer 5 is now one more step away from being able to be published, which means we got to do the tasting/reviewing on Will It Beer 5.
Hopefully we can get those tasters in here in another couple days, and then
so if you want to see Will It Beer 5 the day that it is released, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. That way you can be like, oh man, Will It Beer 5, I love those Will It Beers, let's go and drink this one.
Sweet. Otherwise, for general brewing news, I actually managed to find some kind of interesting articles this week. First of all, that is one that I saw last year, which was really interesting, about large craft breweries that were doing between 150,000 barrels and 6 million barrels a year. And that is that they actually on average experienced a slight increase in growth from last year, 2019, whereas the 3 previous years they actually saw negative growth in at least the volume they produced.
Yeah, so one thing that might suggest to me, and I'm not really sure about this, is because craft beer as a sector in the beer drinking community in America is steadily growing over the last 4 years. That might suggest that the rise in small to medium-sized breweries that are popping up is actually starting to take a downturn. So we're not getting as many new breweries, or at least as quickly cutting into that sector of the larger craft breweries that are, the ones that are the mass out there in all the stores and everything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that's the big question is what's that mean? Is that a thing? And ultimately the numbers did vary. Every brewery, there's the article, I'll try to throw a link down below. The one I found was actually from Brewbound. So if you go to Brewbound's website, you can read that full article. But it lists a whole bunch of the big craft breweries, and ultimately, what this really means, though, is, at least what I saw, is that the ones that are innovating, the ones that I think a big part of it is the ones that are coming out with all these sort of new weird off-the-wall styles, and then really pushing those hard on the marketing things. Those are the guys that are growing, or the guys that are not pushing all these brand new products every single season, every single year. Those are the ones that are really struggling.
Yeah, and I think that part of that does kind of go into the style of the brewery, or at least the motto.
Yeah.
Mantra with an N. The mantra of the brewery, in terms of, I think some of the maybe the older style breweries, especially breweries that have that classic German pedigree, they are not really wanting to, I would say, in their mind, probably quote unquote, sell out to these big new flavorful styles. Because that's the biggest sector that I think is being opened up in the craft beer community, is these intensely flavored beers. So like think pastry stout, that's taking a stout that we all used to love as a regular stout and saying how much big flavors can we add to it. It's the same thing with a milkshake IPA, with the big new juicy hazy Jay-Z we got on. Like just how can you add those big new flavors? And some people don't like that. We're all about trying everything, so
yeah,
it's good for us.
Yeah, no, and I think, to throw out a couple names that I remember from reading the article, we actually, I haven't brought it up yesterday, Deschutes Brewing, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump south from us.
Phenomenal brewery.
They actually had I think 7% negative growth in their sales volume, which is really, that's a lot of beer for a big brewery like that. And we kind of were saying, that might be because while they've always been making good beer, they really haven't done anything to innovate, done anything to push those new styles.
Yeah, the first big thing was their barrel series, getting into that. And they do a lot of really good stuff with the barrels, but it's not where the American market seems to be leaning. Like barrels and those expensive beers that come from doing a lot of aging and a lot of really good technical work, honestly, a lot of those styles aren't fitting with today's America's ADD kind of culture when it comes to beer, in terms of wanting that, big juicy fruit, sushi flavored ice cream pop sundae milkshake, German wit beer or whatever.
Yeah, and I think a good example is that Firestone Walker had a huge increase in their sales volume. They were, I think, one of the highest, at least, at like 14% or something like that. Yeah. And that really doesn't surprise me because they're the ones that are making all those off-the-wall beers. And Firestone Walker, I think they go under a few different other brands now too. So keep that in mind. It's not just beer that says Firestone Walker on it.
And the two biggest brands in terms of overall production, so Boston Beer Company and Younglings, those are the ones that actually saw a negative. They consistently saw a negative too, which I think kind of goes to support the theory that before last year, a lot of new breweries were popping up. A lot of those small to medium scale size guys were taking a chunk of the market. And in 2019, it seems maybe that trend slowed down, so we don't have as many of those new, 10, 15 barrel breweries opening up everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Get your mic a little closer, by the way.
My mic a little closer.
Yeah. Otherwise, that was just kind of an interesting bit about some of the large craft breweries. And then, what is this? Ben, you made some other bits there. The bubble, disinterest in competition.
Oh yeah, does that mean we're any closer to the bubble? I think if we were going to hit the bubble, then COVID would probably have popped it, or at least maybe pull this away from the bubble. People having to go out because of other reasons. It might be showing some signs that we are close to the bubble, or that competition's getting a little bit scarier, which we've kind of talked about in a couple of our other, when you're thinking about opening up a brewery segments, where right now, because of the level of competition and because of how many breweries are out there in distribution, which honestly could be bad for craft beer because it means there's a lot of beer sitting on shelves.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is open up a neighborhood pub, open up a neighborhood tap room that has a lot of walking traffic, and be as close to your local circle of people as you possibly can, because that's the thing that can still grow and thrive.
Yep. Speaking of distribution and still maintaining local quality to your brewery, mobile canning is on the rise. Great segue, Peter.
Yeah, good. You're welcome for segues. I invented them.
So mobile canning has actually been around for a hot minute, which usually what it entails is it's some kind of a company that has a trailer or two, and they will actually jump around, usually regionally, but it can be from even several different states. And they will come to a general area, usually with a handful of breweries. They'll come for a week. They'll basically can up a bunch of batches of beer from a handful of breweries, and then those breweries have several pallets of cans that they can then distribute, and then the canning company will move on to another region, another group of breweries, and repeat that process, and then just kind of rotate through that cycle. And especially since the COVID-19 outbreak, there's been a huge influx in that and a huge demand, because obviously people aren't out there pushing kegs to bars, So that was a really interesting thing that I found.
Yeah, we actually learned that from one of our local brewery friends who started mobile canning and was the first person to go through their mobile canner in the last year. But since that mobile canner's first trip up to Spokane, this is Ya Brewing Company, they've picked up a couple other breweries, and so now when they're up here, they're able to make 3 or 4 canning runs at a time. So it's worth it for them, and it's a good mutually beneficial thing.
Yeah, and the reality of mobile canning, if you are kind of looking to start up a brewery, is that it's a really, really great, cost-effective way to get some cans out on the market, because an actual canning line is extremely, extremely capital intensive. So you have to have a large spot for it. You have to have a lot of expensive equipment to make it happen, and then you also have to have a staff that you're going to be paying to do that, when the reality is that you probably only need to do a canning run, once a week, once a month, maybe, depending on what your size is.
And the question's already come up of how you're canning or what you're canning off of, and what that means is you're canning off of a bright tank almost universally. It's going to be the most consistent across your ways of canning. But canning off of bright tank. Spoke Smoke Mobile Canning, your wife asked about. I believe Spoke's Mobile Canning stopped operating, actually.
Yeah, this is a different company. And then the one downside, though, to canning right now, despite the beauty and the concept of mobile canning sounding awesome, is that if you do plan on distributing your beer, you will still have to get some,
Colas.
Colas?
Yeah, so TTB label approval, basically.
Yep, so you have to get your labels approved, which unfortunately everyone and their mother is trying to do right now, which means that there is a very, very large backup for that. So hopefully, if you want to can some beer and get it distributed out, then you've already got some approved labels you can slap on those cans.
Yeah. All right, on to the next Genus news.
On to the next one. Did I ever make
Import beer may start shipping in pressurized shipping containers. Mega inliner.
Yes.
Hashtag mine.
I stumbled across this, yeah. So the company is called Mega Inliner. They're somewhere, I forget, like Swedish or something like that.
Oh, the Swedes.
Yeah, right. But literally, so all these kegs are being, for import beers, things like, Stella Artois, I don't know, Genus, stuff like that, to America. There's tons of kegs that are sitting in bars that the people that are brewing it can't get back right now. And so they're kind of running into a dilemma where they got a lot of expensive cooperage keg that are just kind of out there in the void. And so they are trying to figure out a better way to ship stuff over. And one of the things I found from Megaliner is they have taken a shipping container format and actually turned it into a pressurized vessel, which is pretty kick butt.
So if you want to be able to drink however much is in a shipping container, have them
There
drop
you
one of
go.
those off in your backyard. You can plumb your whole house with that stuff.
It's the most ridiculous thing ever. But
It makes a lot of sense, actually.
But I feel like, I was like, it might actually work. So what they're doing is they're planning on shipping those in the containers over here, and then I guess putting them in kegs once they get to the United States.
Yeah, that'd be I bet you for like stadiums or sports bars, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Dr. Hans is mad at us, by the way.
It's his fault. Hey, I have Swedish friends.
I don't know if it's actually a Swedish company anyway. I just kind of threw that one out there.
They are scientifically advanced. That's what we meant. Anyways, moving on.
Moving on. Let's get on to our
Beer of the week. Bum, bum, bum. Beer of the week.
Boom,
Boo.
boom. And that is, wait for it. We got a really crazy one this week.
Yeah.
The American Pale Ale.
That is category 18B via the BJCP guidelines. And basically what it is taking everything you know and love about the classic West Coast IPA and toning it down.
The most exciting beer that you actually do want to drink. The American Pale Ale is the sort of variation off of an English style pale ale, where once, English brewers got to America, realized that we had different hop varieties to work with, realized that the taste of Americans actually wanted a little bit more drier of a beer with less crystal malt character to it.
That's right. We were actually eating other Americans at the time.
What?
You said the taste of America? Never mind.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, I was so good at joking.
And ultimately we just kind of took the British Pale Ale concept and made it our own.
Yeah, what that means for us is kind of a dry, light body, a little bit lighter than you're going to get from an English-style pale ale. And the hops are going to be more poppy and citrusy with some floral kind of components, maybe some grapefruit, something like that in there.
So, yeah. So, basically, the breakdown is that you're going to have less crystal malt, if any. The crystal malt should not compete with the hops. The typical malt profile is actually fairly dry, like Peter said, and then you may have some degree of light biscuit or toasty notes in there as well. Otherwise, you're shooting for a moderate ABV beer. However, this can go a little bit higher, can actually kind of overlap slightly into the India American IPA realm as well. And an overall sessionable, should be clear, but can be hazy if you dry hop a lot.
Super fun, and when done correctly, it can be a really tasty and probably the beer that I would go for like 9 times out of 10 when it's done the right way.
Yeah, exactly. So, and speaking of being done the right way, if you want to do a single hop, our hop of the week is going to be Laurel.
Yeah, Laurel is a super fun hop that we started getting more acquainted with, I would say a couple years ago, like 2018, when it started becoming more widely distributed, especially when it came out in cryos, because one of our favorite ways to make hoppier beers is with cryo hops. But Laurel is his heritage is Glacier for its mom, and Glacier apparently is a French origin, some long French hop that I can't pronounce the words, and it is a experimental offspring of Nugget for its father. Overall, the concept of Laurel, though, is it's going to be this nice floral. I would say it's like Cascade and Centennial combined, but on steroids. The floral quality is really, really nice and delicate, and it balances in with some citrus and sometimes even some darker fruit notes to give it that good balance between those classic, like Cascade Centennial, like you used to expect in all American pale ales, with some hints, some subtlety of that New World big fruitiness that you expect from like your mosaics and citrus.
Yeah, it's I like to call it a more balanced mosaic is the best way I can compare it to any other hop, and that's why I feel like as a single hop it would go fantastic in a pale ale. It's not quite as that pungent as something like mosaic, but at the same time it has a wonderful, wonderful balanced profile to it. As for hopping rates, this style calls for
you're looking at a maximum of 50 IBUs on this
Yep.
one, so it actually does overlap with the India Pale Ale, which I think goes down to 45 as the starting.
So yeah, and that's why a lot of times you'll actually see out there, you'll see pale ales and IPAs kind of almost interchange, just because there are some pale ales that are more in the IPA category, where there are some IPAs that might be a little bit more in the pale ale category.
Yeah. Somebody saying they're loving Idaho. I'm guessing that means Idaho 7, which I actually kind of view Idaho 7 in a similar kind of quality as Laurel.
It works, yeah. It's
I would say it's a little bit peachier.
a little one-dimensional to me.
I don't know. I think I like Idaho 7.
I think you need some bright supporting hops with Idaho 7.
I can see it both ways, but Laurel by itself is not tremendously fruity, which is why it's very indicative of American Pale Ale. That's why we're choosing Laurel for this. But at the same time, it does have those nuances of other fruits, which is nice.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, Peter, 50 to 30 IBUs for bitterness, and then you're gonna usually load these guys up at the end pretty well. So to break these things down into a 5-gallon batch, Laurel has a fairly high alpha acid content. So I would say somewhere around 3/4 of an ounce to maybe an ounce for a 60-minute edition off the top of my head. Ounce might be a little on the heavy side. And then probably a 5-minute edition somewhere in there, another ounce or so, and then probably 2 ounces as like a whirlpool. Speaking, you see that? Pre-whirlpool.
Yeah, whirlpool / hopback, you mean?
Yeah, as a hopback, whatever it is. And then another ounce or 2 as a dry hop. So you're kind of shooting for that target range of, I would say, 3 to 5 ounces of total hops in a 5-gallon batch of beer for this guy.
And with the whirlpool, you're going to lean a little bit more into the floral kind of qualities of it. The more dry, maybe herbal, like notes of black tea in that whirlpool. But then going into the dry hop, you're definitely going to be pushing forward some of the citrus, the lemon, grapefruit qualities. Overall, it's a really well-balanced hop, and it's fun to use.
Yep.
But now let's move on to our malt of the week.
Malt of the week. I wrote this down and then forgot what I wrote.
Caramel Steam, or Cara Steam, is our malt of the week, like we were already talking about, and Logan is totally on top of. And also knows what it is.
Cara Steam?
Yeah.
Yes, Cara Steam is a hybrid malt, so it is a Cara biscuit malt from Great Western. Generally has a Lovabond rating, or is it an SRM rating? I always get a mix up. Lovabond of about 50.
Yeah, you got that one right.
And it is actually a fairly pungent malt. It has a lot of that caramel color to it, but also is drier than what a caramel 60 malt might be, and that's kind of why we really like to use it in a lot of our beers. It has a little bit more of that drier biscuity type characteristic to it. With that said, in a pale ale, I feel like it'll really benefit some hops. It'll add a little dimension as long as you don't overdo it.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be going 20% on this one. I would even say 10% is a little on the high side for what I'm looking for. What this colored malt is a very high colored malt that's actually made by incorporating steam during the roasting process. And the steam does two things. One, water plus sugars that are in the malt means you're going to get some of that caramel color and flavor. So that's how they get that intense caramel flavor. But it also feathers the roasting process, meaning it can act to slow down the roasting process so they can really dial in that color. You get a really high colored malt without all the sweetness from a standard caramel malt, which means this is a good one just to kind of play with some color direction and give slight dimension to the character if you use little enough of it, without risking that chance of getting that sweet kind of off-putting dimension.
Yeah, breaking this down for a 5-gallon batch, I would say try to stay below probably 3/4 of a pound. More or less, I would shoot for closer to probably a 6 to 8 ounces is all.
That's exactly where I would go.
And so that's how we would like to use that. Otherwise, for your base malt, whatever your nice, highly modified 2-row base malt you got locally, that's what I would go. And really keep the grain bill pretty simple for a beer like this.
And Dr. Hans, if you're still on, you can be our resident convert to non-American units.
All right, and as for our yeast of the week, wait for it. We got a crazy one for you. Ready?
Chico.
What?
That's like
No
USO5,
way.
which you've probably never used USO5 or American
1056
Ale. Or
flagship
Ale
California Ale. Yeah. Everyone's got it. So this is the classic Sierra Nevada, also known as the Chico strain. And it's just a beast of a fermenter, produces very, very clean ales, produces a sharp hop profile, which is also what you'll be looking for. Mm-hmm. And usually we try to push people away from this strain, but honestly, for this style, it's just the go-to.
It's the prodigal strain. I mean, it's where pale ales were sort of invented. It's one of the beers that actually pushed forward both its yeast and the classic Cascade Centennial hopping profile. So why not use it? And we had to get rid of Chico as a yeast of the week option sooner rather than later, and this is just the perfect style to use it in.
So whatever, it's going to be labeled as American Ale, is really what it is. And it's just a fantastic strain for this style. It's going to accentuate that little bit of dryness. It's going to accentuate any of the hops that we're throwing at it, so it just works.
Yeah, we got nothing against this yeast, by the way, and we did go over this yeast a little bit in our Fermentus Every Style of Yeast Ever video. But the biggest thing why we don't use this yeast very much in our personal brewing or use it in our yeast of the weeks / when we're doing recipes is because we see it in probably at least half of every recipe that comes through here.
Yeah, that's true. And that's like I said, that's why we a lot of times will push people away from that just because we want to push people out of their element. We want people to try something else. And honestly, from a commercial standpoint too, I know you and I have probably tasted so many Chico brewed beers that it's nice to have something that you're like, yep, that's not Chico.
Yeah.
Sweet, that's different.
And in Spokane, I think we got a lot of people that are pushing away from it too. A lot of our favorite breweries are going with non-Chico strains, which is fun because it gives us a chance to try other people's beers that don't use Chico.
Perfect. All right.
That's pretty much it for our beer of the week. Songs. Let's go on to our discussion topics. And the first one is about water, and is your water maybe dangerous / not good to use, and how do you fix that?
Chloramines. Did I yell that really loud?
So chloramines, chlorines, and then we'll touch on like iron and rust and things like that can get into your water supply. This isn't going to be a water chemistry segment. This is just going to be talking about other things that can be in your water that you need to be wary of and how to fix it. So first of all, let's talk about the difference between chloramines and chlorines because they do work a little bit differently and they are different molecules.
So chlorine is going to be found in almost every tap water. Chlorine is a natural killer. It's used to sanitize tap water. But really what separates that from chloramine is think of chlorine as sort of the precursor. But what they actually do to treat tap water, because the one downside to chlorine is that it's very volatile. It likes to off-gas and come out of solution. And as soon as it turns into a gas and it's no longer in the water, obviously it's not going to kill anything, which is great for your beer, not so great for sanitation. Water companies will actually add, is it ammonia?
No, monochloramine. So you can get get monochloramine or some sort of a salt that involves hypochlorites. Hypochlorites will turn into some sort of a chloramine, usually dichloramine or chlorotetramine. if they're adding it in salt form. But that's becoming more and more popular. Water companies treating with chloramines instead of chlorines. Fortunately, if you have a nice basically filter bed with your water source like we do here, your water company says, YOLO, let's just use chlorine and let's only use it rarely so you don't have to worry about it. That's why you may have seen us sparging with hose water on occasion.
Yeah, and so what chloramine is it is ammonia though, right? That binds to it.
Yeah, ammonia binding to a chloride in some sort of way. So all that has to do with the valence electrons and how they end up working. But bottom line, chloramine, super stable, stays in your water.
Exactly.
Chlorine does not. However, both those things will bind and form a permanent chlorophenol when exposed to wort or sugary substances, basically. So if you were to put, even just a diatomic chlorine in your wort for your mash or whatever, you are now stuck.
Yeah, so that is not good. However, So generally our takeaway when it comes to chlorines and chloramines on how to treat them for brewing water is that chlorine is very easy to handle, whereas chloramine, because it doesn't volatilize, because it doesn't off-gas so readily, you actually have to treat it in a little different way. Chlorine, our general take on it is that we heat up our strike water. By the time it gets up to 150, 160 degrees, the beauty of chlorine is that at that point it's all in gas form. It is completely out of your water. It is now safe to use.
Which is good for us because we just usually heat up our strike water early on in brew day, and then we use the same water for everything else in brew day.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
One big vessel, and it is now dechlorinated. Now with chloramines, you have to either treat it the night before with sulfur, that's going to be Camden Tablets or metabisulfite, or you have to run it through a carbon filter.
So, and also one other thing about chlorine that we talked about yesterday, which was really interesting to me, don't feel like your hot water tank or your hot water heater will actually remove the chlorine because it's under pressure.
Yeah. So if it's under pressure in a closed system, that chlorine ain't got nowhere to go, which means that that chlorine can still be in your water in your water tank, and then it's that's why even when you start to pull off hot water, that first draw of hot water can probably be extra chlorine, and you might get a little because that's chlorine off-gassing.
So, all right, and then before we get any further on this, well, let's make sure that everybody knows what this actually does to beer. And I think, like Peter mentioned, they will turn into chlorophenols when either one of these substances reacts with beer, which will end up making your beer taste like a garden hose or like
weird plasticky,
nasty plastic.
Yeah, sometimes if you burn plastic into your beer, you can get a very similar flavor.
Yeah,
and it actually also can come from infection. There are certain bacteria that'll make chlorophenols as well, but that is a whole different topic.
On to the next page.
Real quick while we go on to the next page, a couple questions. Someone asked if we ever used Chico for a hazy. Yes, we actually did that in our very first Had a Haze Craze Like a Boss a while ago. We said, hey, as long as it can biotransformation the hop thing, then it works good as a hazy making machine. And so even though Chico is bright and not super powdery, it does work for hazies if you brew correctly. That's technique. And then, is it better to start from RO water? It is if you want to spend the time building up your water profiles. RO water is a little bit inefficient in terms of how much water goes into the water that you actually get to use in your beer. So there are certain places where, like Arizona, for example, a lot of places in Arizona, RO water is going to be the best way to go regardless. But if you're in an area like we are, where we've got really nice runoff that is pretty good water coming in, we just use our tap water.
Perfect. All right, so yeah, let's get back and finish out the chlorine versus chloramine debate. And so, like we said, they will both cause a plastic flavor in your beer. The best way to deal with them, if you plan on still using your tap water, is if you just have chlorine in your water, to heat up your tap water before you use it. This is a good note to mention here for those of you that are extract brewing. This is something to really be especially aware of, because if you're using cold tap water to top off your extract beer with, that chlorine is actually still going to be in there. You're still going to end up with those chlorophenols. It's actually something that we troubleshoot for customers a lot.
Probably one of the most common off flavors that we get, and it's from extract brewers that are basically putting chlorinated water directly onto their beer, and so it's an immediate reaction. They get those chlorophenols, and once they're bound, they are bound.
Yep, exactly. So definitely be aware of that. If you do have to use tap water to top your beer off, heat it up first. You honestly bring it close to a boil, and
or just do what we always recommend, which is just buy a couple gallons of store-bought water.
Yeah. Ultimately, that's what you're going to do if you are really worried about this affecting your beer. Otherwise, the next treatment option, if you do have chloramines, is going to be Camden Tablets. Hit it with not potassium. Well, I guess you could.
Oh, yeah, potassium or sodium metabisulfite. Or
sodium. Either one of those.
Work. The metabisulfite, give it a day, and it's good to go.
And then, finally, don't top off your water. And the easiest method to avoid this altogether is just to go buy some store-bought water, start from scratch. Do realize, though, that you'll have to kind of rebuild up all that mineral content for the beer style you're brewing if you plan on doing that method.
Yeah, because minerals are something that yeast need. So. Let's go into one more water thing that can happen every once in a while if you live in a place with old pipes, and especially if those, the water district does something to clean out pipes into your area. I've seen this every once in a while where you get sort of runny-looking or like brown-looking water that comes from basically the rust being cleaned off every once in a while.
Yeah, so I actually had this happen to a beer once at my house. The city was flushing our water lines on the same day I was brewing, and I was not paying attention, and ended up with a bunch of rust in my beer. And ultimately, that does some bad news. The rust will actually, It binds with other organic molecules in the beer. This might be fatty acids, this might be tannins, but ultimately in very, very low doses too. The threshold for this is like only a few milligrams per, I forget, liter or something like that. So low flavor threshold, and you end up with this very metallic or inky flavor. A lot of people will say it tastes like you're sucking on pennies. So do be aware of this, and there's a very simple way, luckily, to remove rust, and that is actually to run it through a filter. So filtering your water, that is a great way to actually get rust out of it. So fairly simple thing there, but definitely be aware if you live on, especially like a well, would be another good source of iron. The downside to having a lot of iron in your beer is apparently it helps with head retention.
Yeah.
So, if you want to have a beer that tastes like pennies, but amazing head.
Which, that's what we're all going for.
Pennies for head.
Bottom line, pay attention to your source water. Source water can be a really big impact on the overall quality of your beer. And so if you are questionable about your source water, either buy water from the store. If you get one of those jugs, you can probably fill them for about 30 cents a gallon at Walmart. Or at least get a carbon filter in line. I know there's plenty of places that sell those 10-inch housings with carbon filters. The whole setup runs about $55, and it just ensures that you're going to have good water going into your beer all the time. Right. Let's go on to topic number 2.
Topic number 2 is the hop stand and the concept of the hop stand.
Yeah, so we're constantly talking about ways to get hop flavors into your beer and also reduce the bitterness. That is the baseline behind doing juicy or hazy IPAs. We just released a video on Friday talking about doing a hop stand, and so I wanted to go a little bit more in depth about what we can do in a hop stand and how we use the hop stand to build big flavors in our beer while reducing the overall bittering impact or the overall aggression that can come from that.
Yeah. Hop stand, the term can often be actually interchanged with whirlpool hop additions, but what this generally means is that you are going to, at the end of your boil during your brew day, you're actually going to kill the heat, so you're no longer boiling. Usually what it means is that you're actually going to reduce the temperature in your kettle to some extent. It might be 0 degrees, it might be 30 degrees Fahrenheit, that is. And then you're actually going to add your hops and then just let them kind of sit in the kettle.
What you're trying to do with this is kind of twofold. First of all, you want to make sure that you're maximizing the contact area in whatever way you can. So for me, what that meant in the batch that I brewed for the video released on Friday is once I got those hops in there, I did put them in a bag, but I still used my wort chiller to kind of flush that up and down through the nearly boiling wort at that point to make sure that I'm maximizing my surface area. And then you're also doing a temperature hold so that you can extract the volatiles without risking maybe over-extracting what's it called? The alpha acids.
Alpha acids, yes.
Or hopefully without too much plant matter. So I don't know if you already went over this, but the biggest difference between a hop stand and a whirlpool is just the motion of the water.
Yeah, so a whirlpool generally just means that you're doing the same thing. You're doing a hop stand, but you've got it hooked up to a pump, so you're recirculating your wort throughout that entire time frame.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's maybe a common misconception when it comes to hop stands and or whirlpool hops, and that's how much alpha acids you can actually get off of those. Because even at down as low as 79 degrees, depending on the length of your hop stand, you still are getting a decent utilization of those alpha acids.
Yeah, so most calculators are finally kind of catching up these days for your brewing numbers, and you can adjust that utilization. Are they smart enough to do it for you now? Hop stands yet?
They don't. Well, they do a little bit. At least the Brewer's Friend one does. So if you have a set utilization for your hop stand at 212 degrees, and then you adjust your temperature, the Brewer's Friend will accordingly adjust the utilization based on temperature.
Okay, gotcha.
So
yeah,
they could do that, but you also have to know what your utilization is going to be for the hop that you're doing in your hop stand.
Yeah. So yeah, ultimately you do get utilization though from doing hop stands, especially if you're doing say a 20 or 30 minute hop stand at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. You're definitely going to be pulling bitterness from that. You're definitely pulling, a lot of flavor from that as well.
So I printed out a little graph here that actually shows the utilization of hops over time at different temperatures, and it goes from 100 degrees Celsius to 79 degrees Celsius, which is the same as 212 degrees boiling water Fahrenheit, down to about 175 degrees. And you can see with the graph, you can't see it because I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, they can't see.
But with a 30-minute hop stand, you're getting about...
So just go hold it in front of the camera.
You're getting about 20%, a little bit over 20% of the utilization you'd be getting from a pure boiling temperature. Yeah. So that's definitely a lot less, but in hop stands, you're doing, 4+ ounces of hops. That's a lot of hops. Yeah. And so if you have a 30-minute hop stand and you're getting, 20% of the utilization as you would a 60-minute addition or a boiling addition, that's still a lot.
Which is why we've been joking about it for several years now about how we brew 0 IBU beers.
Yeah, because the calculators never used to add these to your beer at all.
Yeah, so ultimately, like a beer, probably one that we have on tap, the batch that we did with the Julius versus Citrus.
That was all Whirlpool.
So all Whirlpool hops. So technically the calculators say, well, these are 0 IBUs. They're not to style. But the reality is,
probably 35 IBUs.
Yeah, exactly. Quite a bit of utilization from that. With that said, if you do want to actually bitter a beer, this is not the way to go. It is something to consider, though, especially on the hazy, the new school IPAs that we're loading these things up with hops on the back end. It does have a significant impact on the beer, which makes it really easy to actually over bitter a beer as a result.
But we love this technique because it does reduce the risk of like overly astringent or overly bitter beers if you're adding them in during the boil, and then have a variable length of time where you're chilling it down. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a 5-minute addition, which is supposedly your big flavor addition, and then your wort chiller takes a half an hour to slow down. That's a lot bigger impact on the overall bitterness of your beer than if you just know that you got your beer down to 200 degrees and then you did a 20-minute hop stand.
Yep, exactly. It adds a little bit more control, especially if you are running a counterflow chiller.
Absolutely.
Because the counterflow chillers are going to knock things out immediately once they flow through them, but you also have a large volume that might be sitting hotter for longer versus an immersion chiller.
One more quick point before we get to the shearing/Q&A section of today's episode. I know.
I'm like,
there is variance in flavors that you get off of different temperatures of hop stand. So what that means is just play around. We're not going to go over all the specifics of what you get with all the different hops because there's a lot to go into with that. But play around with temperature ranges from 85 to 200 degrees and then from 45 to 85 degrees. So try to do hop stands in those two different temperature ranges and see what you get off of it because it will be slightly different.
Yeah. Otherwise, just if you do have an immersion chiller, another great way to do that is to just kind of slow down the water flow through your chiller and then add a couple hop additions as you're chilling down with just a really kind of slow trickle of water to just get you to slowly drop over the course of a half an hour from that boiling point down to your 170 degree mark, 150 degree mark even.
Yeah.
So. All right.
Now we're on to the shearing/Q&A.
Uh-oh.
All right, I'm going to get the microphones tuned up just a little bit to make sure that he can do your Q&A while I do the shearing.
We're going to open up for general questions now. I think I actually have a spare shirt in the back, so I'm not going to take my shirt off. I don't want to take my shirt off every single time. What are you grabbing?
So I'm turning my microphone down. I'm going to turn your microphone up just a little bit. Put it farther away from you.
Yeah. All right, to follow up on one of the questions from way earlier about Chico strain too, that Peter didn't mention. He mentioned that we've used Chico strain for hazies, but he did not mention that we made, I think still our best hazy to date with Chico strain. And we almost did it just to prove a point of the yeast is one of the least important parts about brewing a hazy IPA, and it's all the other methodology that goes into it that really makes the biggest impact. What are you doing?
I turned your mic up so I can put this further away from you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Bam. One.
You want me to start with the number?
Bam. All right. Somebody is asking I loaded it up with a number 4. That's what Samantha said. All right. I guess I got to take this off now too. So somebody's asking us about our Amazon fermenters and the surface scratches and infection and stuff. And the bottom line when you start getting surface scratches or you start having, surfaces that are not smooth, it gets much, much more difficult to sanitize them with a traditional sanitizer like Star San. And that is really, really why we push heat sanitation. And that's the beauty of the metal fermenters is that you can actually sanitize them with heat. Definitely, if you plan on going for the purchase of those Amazon... Okay, you're just going for it. All right. Those Amazon fermenters, by the way, that you got to go slow.
Oh, I know.
You've never cut hair before, have you?
I have. Your thing is already clogged. Are you going to keep talking or what?
Okay. So, if you plan on buying those Amazon fermenters, you're definitely going to want to heat sanitize them as a general practice just because there's no way those dip tubes are going to be able to get sanitized every time. So, bam. Somebody says use barley wine. Yeah, sanitize it with barley wine. That'll do. Somebody's making dinner. Wow, they must be somewhere over in Europe.
Send us some.
Somebody is asking what our favorite dry saison yeast are. Currently using Bella Saison and looking to try something new. You know, you're gonna be hard pressed to find something better than Bella Saison. Honestly, we've used that strain so many times with just such great consistency and such great flavor that this is really distracting. That you are gonna be hard pressed to find a better saison strain. With that said, I believe Fermentus makes another saison strain. Do you remember what it is, Peter?
Fermentus makes the the BE 256 or something like that.
Yes, BE 256 from Fermentus. That would be another great one to try. Otherwise, the French saison from Mangrove Jack.
That's a diastaticus variant, which is nice.
Yeah, that would be another fun one. That's going to give you your typical super, super dry, clovey, phenol flavor profile. Damn. Somebody's saying I'm dishing out secrets. Yeah, but otherwise, Bella Saison, you can't go wrong. I love that strain. It's the best of both worlds.
I was right. I am super shaky. I need more coffee.
All right. So Ben is asking if we do closed transfer from keg to fermenter. From fermenter to keg. And the answer to that is actually all depending on the beer. In fact, yesterday I just did a transfer of 2 5-gallon batches, and because they were higher ABV, darker beers, I honestly didn't even worry about the closed transfer. All I did was throw the auto siphon in there and do it regularly. However, a closed transfer for anything that's going to be a paler colored beer, anything that's going to be hop forward, you definitely want to consider at least a closed transfer, and I highly recommend doing it if you can, especially for those hazies. Those seem to be the most susceptible to that, whatever you would call micro-oxidization. And so yeah, definitely closed transfers on hazies. As for your porters and stouts, it's probably not going to have nearly as much of an impact, if not any impact. If you do have a vessel that you can pressurize a little bit, though, it kind of makes transferring easier because you don't have to lift it up. I know I've kind of done some workarounds with some big ol' Speedle fermenters where I had 10-gallon batches, and I just hooked those up to my CO2 under 3 or 4 psi, and I'm able to pressure transfer out of them that way. So that's another thing to consider. All right. Somebody's saying this would be a bad time for power to cut out. All right. Somebody's asking about general tips for saisons. Golly, saisons are such a broad beer style that you actually have a lot of options for them.
Consecutive pitches.
Oh yeah, that's true. So consecutive pitches. So let me give you a quick breakdown of something I love to do for one of the most complex saisons, and that is to use your hair to. Yeah, it's thick. I know.
I'm trying to go with small chunks so that I don't do that to you.
And that is actually to pitch both of the Yeast strains of saison. So they have a French saison strain, which is a diastaticus variant, which will just make beers bone dry, push through really intense clove and phenol characters. And then they also have a Belgian saison strain, which is known for throwing like these big bubble gummy flavor profiles. However, that Belgian saison is notorious for having stuck fermentations, and so as a workaround to making sure that my beer finishes out, I will actually pitch the Belgian saison and let it ferment for 3 or 4 days, and then actually pitch the French saison on top of that, just to finish out the process. And what I find is that pitching both of those strains consecutively ends up with a very, very nice, complex beer in the end that still has that dry profile that most people are looking for in a saison, but also has a little bit of that kind of bubblegummy goodness that you get from the Belgian saison yeast. Otherwise, my personal favorite for style is to just keep the grain bill really simple. Even just 100% Pilsner malt will really shine in a nice saison. But I've had some fantastic dark saisons too. With that said, you just have to really make sure your malts are complementing the yeast instead of competing with the yeast flavors. So, as for hops, I usually try not to throw much hops at all at any saison, just because it can get a little bit too much. So, yeah, so that's my take on saisons. Farmhouse strains as well. Brett as well can add a little complexity if you want to throw some Brettanomyces, either Brett Brux or Brett Lambicus. Just going for it now, aren't you?
Well, yeah, now I'm through most of the thick stuff. So we're getting there.
Oh yeah, the beard's getting trimmed up too, for sure. Apparently I'm a true performer. All right. We got Diamond Rhodes is asking, what grains and hops do you think work best in kettle sours? Or sour IPAs, obviously they help balance the malty characteristics with fruity hoppiness. We try to keep those pretty simple for kettle sours. I don't think that we've made a malt forward kettle sour yet, and I mean maybe it can be done, but just typically with sours the sweetness from the malt can get really, really weird with the overall acidity of the beer. So yeah, kind of same thing as the saisons, just really, really simple grain bills, acid malt. We might throw some adjunct malts in there, so things like flaked wheat, things like flaked oat, things like flaked barley as well, to add body if we want to try to maintain that, but try to keep the overall color of the beer really, really light. Generally, we won't ever throw any kind of crystal caramel malts in there. Somebody says to leave the beard. Yeah, so that's my take on sours. Bam. Somebody says $50 in super donation, shave it bald. $100 for eyebrows. Damn, way to be harsh.
Bet.
Everybody wants my brows off. All right, what yeast would be good in a fruited kettle sour? Generally, most sours that we do, we're going to try to use a German ale yeast, just because those yeast strains, that's going to be, for example, K97 yeast from Fermentus if you're looking for a good dry strain. If you're looking for a good liquid strain, either Y yeast 1007 German ale or the Kaiser A07, is it? Same thing, from Imperial. Will also do the trick for you. Those actually will really complement any kind of fruit beer, but more so that strain will tolerate the acidity of the beer. So even if you kind of bring that way down and make it really acidic, then the yeast will actually still be able to ferment that out without any problems. I know we tried to do a British ale for one sour, and it actually could not take it down all the way, and I think that was just because of the pH was too much for the yeast to handle.
But it still tasted good.
Bam. Somebody's talking about. So Will is asking for a combination of light diesel smoke looking color in beer. I don't really know what that means. Oh yeah, so that would actually be another good yeast for sours. It'd actually be one of the Click strains. Thank you, Featherston Autofab. Yeah, that would be another good one, which we actually finally have a dry strain of too. We got the Kvass strain from, is it Lallemand? I think it's Lallemand, in stock now. So we're really excited to actually play with that, because otherwise we've only had liquid forms of that. I think people are just tuning in.
Like, what?
Yes.
What is going on?
So yeah, for those of you just tuning in, we are shearing me today. I'm getting very itchy.
How small do you want to be?
Just keep going all the way around. Just keep going. Our take on fruit-infused beers. I love fruit-infused beers as long as it is done with fruit. I personally, I think I am a little bit more sensitive to the artificial flavorings that some of the bigger craft brewers and even the macro guys are putting out in beers when they're making beers, and they're just sort of dosing them with fruit flavorings. More often than not, those come across as being very, very fake and very, very artificial, and honestly quite off-putting to me. So when it comes to fruiting beers, I love doing it. I'm more than willing to do it with just about any style, and my favorite method on doing that is actually pureeing the fruit, adding some metabisulfite or sanitizing it in some way. You can also pasteurize it by heating it up, and then racking the beer after it's gone through a primary fermentation onto the fruit, and that's actually the only time that I'll use a secondary fermentation. So the fruit will end up usually drying the beer out. It'll add a little bit of acidity. So depending on the fruit, especially if you're using something like raspberries or strawberries, you'll end up with a little bit of tartness from it. And it really helps maintain the delicate quality of the fruit in there.
You ready?
Yeah. And also my take on fruiting beers is to go ham on it. You know, don't make a 5-gallon batch of beer and throw a pound of fruit at it. Definitely throw 5, 6, 7 pounds of fruit and really let that fruit shine. Bam.
I like that you end everything with bam. For berries, I think 5 pounds for a 5-gallon batch has kind of been my magic number, my sweet spot for a lot of them.
Yeah, and that's gonna vary between everyone. I did one of the best learning moments I had in my brewing endeavors was a 10-gallon split batch where I did a flat of raspberries in 5 gallons, and then I did a flat of blackberries in 5 gallons, and the raspberry turned out a beautiful color but tasted like nothing but raspberries, whereas the blackberry version actually had a very, very subtle, nice balanced blackberry flavor to it. So same weight of berries, but very different beers. Okay, you gonna talk a little bit now that you're gonna shave around my mouth?
Yeah, I can talk. What's the next question?
All right. This one.
Brewed a Yingling Lager clone yesterday. What kind of time frame, once primary is finished, do you leave it in the fermenter to condition? That is a great question. So the Yingling, for those of you who don't know, is kind of a Vienna style amber lager. and it will taste great, but maybe a little bit more along the like American Amber kind of flavor profile as a fairly young beer, so right around that 4-week time frame. However, to do a true Yuengling clone, to make it Yuengling-esque, you're going to want to let that lager for a couple months. The longer you can let it sit and brighten up, the better it's going to taste more like that true traditional Vienna-style amber lager.
Yeah, if you got the time, that's the easiest thing to do. Throw it in a keg and kick it in the back of the Keezer for a month or two. Damn.
All right, I'll trim up the outside. And then,
Damn, somebody.
I'll leave the mustache alone for you.
Somebody is asking about more present smokiness in a smoked Helles.
We just got a sweet new malt.
I was gonna say we just got a sweet new malt that actually sounds perfect for that. It was a oak smoked malt, right? Is it wheat?
Oak smoked wheat.
Yeah, oak smoked wheat. See if you can track any of that down. It had a really, really nice balance to it. I don't think it would actually be too aggressive for a Helles either. I wouldn't be hesitant at all to throw a pound or two of that at it. Otherwise, I would probably stick away from peated malts and go more along the lines of you could do like a lot of Rauch malt too. Rauch malt's mellow, but using 50% of that in a grain bill, that's barley. So
why is your hair so close to your ear?
I don't know.
Get out of there.
Is that not normal?
It makes it very difficult to not cut you. I'm trying very hard to not cut you, by the way. You're welcome.
Somebody's asking about our cannular and how well it's holding up. Pretty fantastic, actually. Tim tried to kill it, but it turns out he just like overheated it and had to push the button or something like that. No, but we have put a lot of beer through that thing, especially during the COVID shutdown. I think we probably ran somewhere around 1,500 cans through that now, and it seems to be holding up just fine. Other than a belt might need to be replaced eventually. I haven't looked at it, but
replacement parts are accessible and cheap though.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's one thing that needs to be replaced is the bearing on it. Just because we've cleaned it a lot, and there is a little bearing that's non-stainless underneath there. So eventually we'll have to get a new one of those. But I already looked them up. They're like $6. I was like, dang it, they were out of stock. So otherwise I would have ordered like 3. Yes, I am a person. People are being mean to me.
He's 30% werewolf. That's a fact.
All right. Will is asking a light dark color that would maybe be like the smoke from diesel. Okay. So you're trying to get like a grayish smoky character, I think, is what Will is asking for the color of a beer. And actually using rye malt will kind of throw that odd gray color. So using a pretty high proportion of rye malt can often do that.
Black glitter.
Black glitter. Oh God. Actually, that wouldn't be the worst idea. Rye malt is kind of going to be the only thing that'll give you a sort of gray color that I'm aware of for malts. Otherwise, you're going to fall either in the yellow, brown, or red spectrum of things.
How do you get rid of your sideburns? Where do those stop?
Just keep going, just all the way.
Well, I'm on a... Nailed it.
Uh-oh. That's never a good sign.
No, it looks good. It's a small separation.
Oh, jeez. All right.
It's hard to see where your hair's supposed to stop.
Damn.
All right, we'll call that good. You're beautiful. Once again.
All right, Peter's beard is coming off now. Here, hop shot. Aww. Somebody's asking for barley from a feed store. Ooh, that sounds like a bad idea.
I have seen people use it. The malting, it's the hard part.
Here, let me get rid of some of this this hair here, though.
I'm gonna laugh if one of those just catches on fire.
Oh God! All right, Papa Squat. All right, tell them about why feed store barley is a bad idea?
So feed store barley, actually, what you don't expect when it comes to malting is barley actually is graded. What that means is that the breweries kind of get the first selection of barley when it comes to what they get to...
Sideburns or no sideburns?
No sideburns.
All right.
In terms of what they get to actually make beer with, or make malt out of. And so the top rated barleys are the ones that get malted.
Oh yeah, we're going sideburns.
And then the worst barley gets kind of goes down the line. So some of it will go to food processing, some of it will go to like major companies that kind of resource it. And then the very, very bottom grade or the worst barley you can possibly get for brewing is the stuff that ends up getting put into feed. Usually it's high protein, which is good for animals, but bad for making beer out of. And then on top of that, you also have the fact that it is very difficult to turn that into something that you can actually make beer out of. What I mean by that is feed store barley is obviously unmalted. And so to make it something you can make beer out of, you actually have to go through the malting process, which as a home maltster... is it's less consistent than what you can do when you buy barley, or if you were to make barley as a make malt as a professional maltster. Now, there's a lot of variation in terms of like the length of the acrospore that you're going for when it comes to germination, and there's also a lot of variation in terms of what color you get when you go to actually kilning the malt, even if you do have a rotary kiln or something to churn the malt while you're trying to roast it. So those are a lot of the reasons that feed store barley does work, and I know people that have made good beer out of it, but it's definitely not easy and definitely not something that is going to be a consistent product that you can really rely on. So if you're trying to make like a clean IPA or a lager, just buy that nice quality grain. That is something that...
How are we looking?
Looking good so far. That nice quality grain that's just something that somebody already selected for.
I like it.
And then also turned into good malt.
What's everybody think? Just leave it there?
Looking good? If I make sour beer, do I have to dedicate that equipment to sours moving forward, or can I sanitize to kill bugs and use for regular beers? So if you make sour beer, that kind of depends. If you are using all stainless equipment, you have the power to kill with fire. You do still have to make sure that you're changing out your gaskets, but basically you can put boiling water in pretty much anything and do a really good job of and do a really good job of making sure that it's relatively safe to use.
All right, what's the next question? Read the next question, and I'm going to get your underside.
We're still talking about sanitizing.
Oh, sanitizing. Yes, heat sanitizing, always going to be the best choice. Never use chlorine. Call back to our chlorine thing. That's also why you don't want to sanitize fermenters with chlorine. Yeah, that little whatever you call that patch is not cool looking. This, on the other hand, might work.
Fu Manchu?
Yeah, I think you can pull it off.
Talk about if you make sours with plastic parts.
Sours with plastic parts. Plastic is naturally porous. I mean, everything's porous to some degree, but plastic is especially porous. And so that is generally not the best idea to do for sours. Unless you plan on more or less brewing the same sour every single time, because it will absorb those tart sour flavors and put that into your next beer. And it's going to be a little bit harder to sanitize if you've got any nooks and crannies that you can't heat sanitize, especially something like PET. High density polyethylene is a little bit more forgiving, but PET... unless you got a dedicated thing for it, probably not the best idea.
So yeah, next question. Tried to brew with kits, but only found a stout. Any IPO? Any IPA kits? We actually have some really easy to brew IPA kits on our Brewer's Friend. Look up our quote-unquote Space Dust clone. It's not actually a Space Dust clone, but it's kind of aiming for that same style. So look up that, and that's a good kit.
What kind of IPA? That's my question for the viewers. So there's so many different profiles of IPAs that you can shoot for these days. Oh, man, I'm getting good at this actually. I'm kind of proud of myself. Well, I think I might have screwed this side up a little bit. It's hard to see when I'm not spot on. front onto you.
Upgrade mash tun and kettles to Bruzilla, or upgrade PP fermenters to stainless. Fermenters to stainless.
For sure.
That's you get so much more utility off of doing stainless fermenters, and a lot of times they come sort of pressure rated, too. So it's better for being able to do closed transfer, and they're the 100% easiest to clean, easiest to take care of. So they have the longevity that makes it worth it. Space. The Space Dust
just spamming no.
The Space Dust clone kit is runs about $45 here in the shop.
Perfect. All right, ready. There we go. We got to free that up. You reading more comments?
Mm-hmm. Get an Anvil stainless fermenter. Yeah.
So we did our review on the Amazon stainless fermenters. Anvil makes some, Spike makes some fantastic ones, but they're definitely not cheap. The brew buckets, actually. Our brew buckets, I thought were overpriced, honestly, for a while, until we started pulling a few and using them in the back. And they're actually very, very utilitous. They definitely put some thought into making those, so that's something I would definitely recommend, especially if you can get them on sale somewhere. Look at that. Look at that. He looks like a man again. One more bit. All right.
Can you lager after bottling, or should it be in secondary? Yes, you can lager after bottling. That's one of my favorite ways to lager, and that's what I tell a lot of people to do, is actually just go ahead and get their beer into the bottle, and that's the easiest way to age it and keep it in a closed system. So yeah, lagering after bottling is definitely a good idea.
What do you think, peeps?
I got hair in my mouth. Talking while being sheared is not easy.
I actually really like that look on you. I'm not gonna lie.
All right, so that's it for the shearing part of this.
It's like two brand new men.
Yeah. Someone says chocolate rye and what style of beer? The chocolate rye I actually haven't used yet. Chocolate wheat, I know I love it as a soft substitute for chocolate. It's got phenomenal, slightly fruity characters. And if you're gonna be there, I gotta turn your mic on.
Oh, okay, I got it. You can turn it on.
So hit the pad button on, for you, it's going to be the left hand, the number 1. It's the PAD button, and then you just got to turn the dials to the same as mine, and then turn mine down a little bit. Okay. I've got like hair in my throat.
Like a personal problem. Let's see what that gets us.
All right, how's that sounding? Overall, aesthetically, are we upgraded? I'm afraid to drink my coffee because I think I'm just going to be drinking my my hair at this point.
Tim's going to come in and be like, there's hair everywhere. All right. People saying, love the hairy shoulders. Stunnas.
Hairy shoulders. The new look.
Somebody said, please tell Logan to stop. I think I did, actually. I think I stopped where I got you.
Well, the first time they said that is when I had still the big, puffy, outlets.
Okay. So is there any more questions? We'll try to answer. I don't know what time it is, but
it's pretty close to opening up time, and we probably got some hair to sweep up.
Huckleberry IPA. Actually, I think we're gonna do a blueberry sour very, very soon. At least that's what I've been telling people. So
blueberry sour is very near on the docket.
I think it is time to deliver on that, especially since the genus for a blueberry is literally Vaccinium.
Yeah. So blueberry sour, the cure to everything.
Somebody says the cure to hair in your throat is beer. All right. Well, should we call it a day?
I think we'll call it a day. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Tito, for the super chat / donation at the beginning. That was super awesome. We appreciate it. We do these live streams every single Sunday at 8:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So tune in for those. Follow us on our Instagram if you want to see updates on things like when we're doing Will It Beers, kind of a little bit of behind the scenes that go into that. If you haven't already, before we close this out, throw a thumbs up on this video. I see there's 120 of you watching and only 32 likes so far, so make sure that you give that thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, we just passed 16,000 subscribers, and we would love for you to join the list of subscribers that are on this, so please do that. And other than that, I think Logan will finish the wrap-up while I go ahead and end this stream.
Yeah, definitely give a like if you think Peter looks like a badass now, by the way, because, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that, actually, trim job that I did. Hashtag not professional. Ew. Yeah, we got a lot of cleanup to do. All right, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.